Now, the rest of the story. Lord Francis Rawdon, gazing from a window in his quarters, could hardly believe his eyes. For there, through the main gate of the stockade, strode a tiny, red-haired, blue-eyed woman, unarmed, unaccompanied, and yet issuing orders to the prison camp guards, as though she might be the King of England himself. "I insist on seeing my boys," the woman exclaimed. And Lord Rawdon, the camp's commander, irresistibly impressed and a little amused, invited this bold intruder to tell him personally the rest of the story. "You," she said, "are holding my 2 sons a prisoner. The younger is barely 14. They were captured following a skirmish 40 miles from here. The woman, her name was Elizabeth Hutchinson. The woman went on to relate how the boys were subsequently sword-slashed by an arrogant British officer, angered that his young captives had refused to shine his boots. They were then forced to march without food or water and even bandages for their wounds all the way to Camden, South Carolina, and to this very stockade. You may speak with your sons," Lord Rawdon said, "but I ought to warn you that there's an outbreak of smallpox among the prisoners." Well, Elizabeth just brushed that warning aside and demanded once more to see her boys. "Take this woman to the 2nd floor of the jailhouse," Lord Rawdon told a sentry, and that ought to have been that. But only a short while later, Elizabeth returned, banging with her fist on the commander's door. Her sons, on the daily ration of a solitary piece of stale bread, were starving to death. Their wounds from the British officer's sword remained untreated, and for all she knew, they were both contracting the deadly disease that was now ravaging the camp. "I've heard there's to be an exchange of prisoners with the rebels," Elizabeth said. "You must include my boys among the prisoners you release." And Lord Rawdon, more impressed than ever by the bravery of the fiery-eyed Irish immigrant, granted her request. For her elder son, Robert, help had arrived too late. The 40-mile journey home, made more arduous still by a cold, drenching downpour, only weakened him further. He died of smallpox 2 days later. But Robert's younger brother had become infected as well, so Elizabeth watched over him day and night until he was out of danger. And then she hurried off to Charleston Harbor, 160 miles away, to nurse ailing American captives aboard disease-ridden British prison ships. It was in this effort that she died several weeks later, probably of cholera, after which she was hastily buried in Charleston in an unmarked grave. Yet don't let it be forgot, as we revisit and revere the men on whose deeds the foundation of this fledgling nation was laid, that one of those men would certainly not have survived to make a difference, but for the daring of his mother, Elizabeth Hutchinson Jackson, who alone, yet unrelenting, snatched him from British captivity in 1781. For the history of the American Revolution and beyond reveals the patriot who was to become the 7th President of the United States, Andrew Jackson, to have been above all a man of courage. Now you know where he got it, because you know the rest of the story.
And now for the rest of the story. Elizabeth Hutchinson Jackson, that fiery mother who wouldn't back down from those British soldiers, was, as Mr. Harvey explained, a good example to her son, Andrew. Andrew's father died at the young age of 29 in a logging accident while clearing land in 1767. Andrew was born 3 weeks later. Throughout his lifetime, Andrew Jackson had the same fiery nature. Elizabeth had hoped that Andrew would become a minister and had the young boy tutored by a local clergyman. But after a while, it became clear that Andrew was just too hot-tempered and too strong-willed for the life of a minister. You know, when we think of Andrew Jackson, we picture an older or elderly gentleman who had done a lot of living. Andrew was just 11 or 12 years old when he began his military service. Andrew and his brother served as couriers and scouts. Andrew and Robert were captured in April 1781 when Andrew was just 14 years old. Another example of his fiery nature happened when Andrew was a young attorney. Andrew took offense to some remarks that another attorney, by the name of Waite Still Avery, said while they were fighting on opposite sides of a legal case. Andrew challenged Waite Still to a duel. Waite Still had no choice but to accept the challenge because of the prevailing sentiment of the times. But neither man was hurt. Andrew fired his pistol, but the shot missed. Waite Still could have taken careful aim and probably could have killed Andrew Jackson right there. Imagine how that could have altered American history. But Waite Still refused to fire. Even though Waite Still refused to fire his pistol, his honor was saved because he had been fired upon in the duel. In 1806, Andrew fought another duel, this time with Charles Dickinson. Andrew and Charles got into an argument over a horse race, and Charles purportedly said something offensive about Andrew's wife. Andrew challenged Charles to a duel. This time Charles shot first, but the bullet was stopped by Andrew's breastbone. Andrew took careful aim, shot, and killed Charles. Fast forward to the War of 1812. Andrew had enlisted over 2,000 volunteers. John Armstrong, the Secretary of War, sent Andrew orders to disband and to turn all of his men's supplies over to an officer whom Andrew accused of being a traitor. Andrew absolutely refused and earned the nickname Old Hickory for his toughness. Another time, Andrew and one of his men got into a fight with two brothers. Andrew received the only dangerous injury, a gunshot to the shoulder. The stories of Andrew being hot-tempered and strong-willed could go on and on. If it's true that Andrew inherited his strength and feistiness from Elizabeth, his mother, it's no surprise why that British officer agreed to allow her to visit her young sons and to get them released, as Mr. Harvey explained. In Andrew Jackson's case, I suppose the fruit doesn't fall too far from the tree. I'm Brad Dison, and as Paul Harvey would say, good day.